Hey guys, welcome back to Bite Test Tactics. Today we're doing a Age of Wonders Planetfall damage channel discussion, and today we're talking about the kinetic channel damage. This one's a bit of a doozy, so buckle up. Kinetic channel damage is unique in Planetfall, so it's kind of unique because it's comprised of damage from different types of weapons groups, both firearms and explosives. This is kind of a core gameplay mechanic that you need to understand to really understand the fundamentals of how damage works in Planetfall. But so as an example, if you look at a Vanguard Trooper, which I have a unit unboxing video for that you can look at, they have both a firearm skill with their assault rifle and also an explosive skill with their grenade. And now both of these abilities do kinetic damage, but they're from different weapons groups. And essentially that means that they can make use of different mods and interact with other game mechanics through firearms or explosives paths along the way. At a high level though, kinetic damage is really geared around high direct damage output. Usually it's with, for firearms anyways, it's with high damage, potentially low accuracy shots. Explosives are shorter range, high damage AoEs. That are also usually pretty good at demolishing cover and structures and impact and staggering units. Also note, which I'm not going to really discuss much in this video, but many of the melee type attacks in the game are considered kinetic damage as well. Vanguard and VAR are the two factions that employ kinetic damage. Ethereal units are naturally resistant to kinetic damage channel. Let's start looking at the two paths. So what I will do, actually, I'm going to alternate between firearms and explosives channels, and you'll see this as we progress through the video here, but this will start to make sense as we go through this, hopefully. So for the first tech in the kinetic line, we get subjugation ordnance. This gives us a tactical op and a weapons mod, and this is kind of a good place to start because we'll be talking about some of the other mechanics that are the kind of the nuances of these weapons groups as well. So the Shredder Bomb, it's a 1 hex AoE, does 12 kinetic damage. It also has the chance to apply the bleeding status to biological and cyber units. Bleeding reduces the unit's kinetic resistance by 2 and also deals 5 kinetic damage per turn to the unit. Kind of a more direct way or a different way to apply some of the same debuffs to enemies is with the flechettes. So this is an ammunition type mod. It's an offensive mod, but it's an ammunition type, and what that means is it only applies to firearms abilities, but you can only have one type of ammunition equipped on a unit at any time. So the advantage here with flechettes is your units have a chance to apply that same bleeding effect to biological and cyber units for 3 turns. Interesting to note though, the Shredder Bomb applies the effect for the entire combat. The ammunition will just apply it for 3 turns. But it's the same effect either way. Also, of course, with weapon mod you get the base 10% increased damage on all of the unit's abilities. So now we're going to switch over to the first tech on the explosive path, and you'll kind of see as we go back and forth between these, you'll see this will start to make more sense, hopefully. But first up on explosives, we have enhanced payloads. Again, here we get a tactical op and we get an offensive mod that we can use. Advanced munitions provision. The tactical op is a buff to a friendly unit. That unit must have an explosive attack on it. The unit gains 1 hex range, 25% damage, and massive impact on its attacks, which mean these are going to stagger any unit that doesn't have stagger immunity, and this buff lasts on the unit for 2 turns. So this is actually I think this is actually really strong, and for the cost, I think really effective. So each part of the buff is nice, and together it's just, I think, pretty powerful when you combine all the benefits. One thing to note, I'll say with this one, if you know you're going to be putting this buff on one of your units, keep in mind when you're planning your unit's movement that you're going to have that extra range for your explosive ability, as part of that turn. So something to keep in mind. On the mod side of things for this explosive tech here is flash payloads. And essentially, these just have a relatively small chance to apply the blinded debuff to non-ethereal units for 2 turns, along with the 10% damage token damage bonus. So a blinded unit is 40% less accurate and cannot use Overwatch abilities. So those are both useful, nothing amazing, I think, but especially when you're applying this to large groups of enemies with usually the AoE explosive attacks, this can be really nice in certain situations. So now we're switching back to firearms, and we're talking about the second technology in the firearms path. So it's electromagnetic utilization. In this case, we're going to get 2 offensive weapons mods. The electrified ammunition is our second version of an ammunition we can get. Remember, the first one we talked about in firearms was flechette. This case, we're obviously thematically it's a little bit different, so we have a chance to inflict the electrified debuff on cyborg and mechanical units for 3 turns. And what that basically does is those units debuffed with this are going to have 15% accuracy penalty and also take 5 arc damage per turn. So what's cool, again, it isn't amazing by itself, but what's nice about the ammunition types is you're able to tailor the units that you're using to effectively fight against enemies that you're bound to encounter. So you can kind of split up some of your units using electrified ammo, some of them using flechette ammo, and so on and so forth. And effectively, you'll be more able to target the right type of units with the units that have the right ammunition, which can be really effective. So for the second offensive mod, it's rail accelerators. This one's a little more straightforward, so it's just giving you improved accuracy of 10% and also 1 extra range. This is just, it doesn't sound exciting, but it is really useful. It synergizes well with a lot of potentially some of the hero skills and abilities that you'll have access to as your primarily your heroes and your leader level up. Certainly on range specialized heroes, this can be really, really useful. Flipping back over to explosives path, this is the second one up. It's thermodynamics, and all we get here is just 1 tactical operation, and it's actually I think a pretty powerful one. So it's kind of interesting too. You drop a 1 hex AoE radius flare. Targets that are affected by the radius are illuminated, meaning they're 30% easier to hit. Also, at the start of your next turn, the same area is hit with 20 kinetic damage. So basically, your enemy is going to have a chance to get out of the way of this AoE coming on the next turn, the 20 kinetic damage. That's kind of just nice to have on top. It's icing on the cake. The 30% easier to hit is really nice to be used on your turn as you use this op. The cost I think is a little bit high for this one, but I think again if you're able to synergize this with some other abilities, it actually can be really nice to get the double dip if you can. One thing to note, I'll say here too, again, if you're doing kind of the mental math on as you're playing out turns and trying to look ahead to the next turn that you're going to get, if you can account for that extra 20 kinetic damage, if you think you're going to hit some wounded enemy units who may potentially die or be damaged, you can again sort of layer that into your movement and tactics that you're taking on the turn you're on right now. So something to think about. Switching back to explosives, switching back to firearms, I should say, the third in the firearms group is explosive payloads. And again, we're just going to get a tactical op and an offensive mod. And so cluster shell, this one is kind of a bit of a dice roll. There's some RNGs involved in this one. It's pretty expensive, so it's kind of a high risk, high reward, I think. But it definitely offers the potential to do quite a shitload of damage. So what it is, it's effectively going to hit between 3 and 5 enemies for 12 kinetic damage, also with massive impact. So again, massive impact is going to stagger anything that doesn't have stagger immunity, which is nice, and it lasts for the enemy's next 2 turns. So now, what's good about this is everything it does. What's bad about this is the RNGs is part of it. You know, you're not going to control which enemies it's going to hit or how many enemies it's going to hit, but the ones it is going to affect are, are going to feel the pain. So, in large scale multi, 6+ unit engagements, this is almost always useful, regardless of what RNGs this does to you. Switching over to the ammunition, the fire burst ammunition. This is our third ammunition option that we have available. So we're switching our kinetic damage to thermal damage, and also have a chance to set targets on fire, causing burning for 3 turns. Burning, I think we talked about earlier, but it's 5 burning damage per turn. And actually, I almost forgot this. So the other nice thing of this ammunition, probably the best part of this ammunition actually, is targets that you're hitting with this. Your attacks are going to deal 50% damage to adjacent units, and this includes yours actually, so you have to be aware of that. So that's very useful, and also you get the 20% token increase on all abilities with this ammunition equipped. All right, I said this was going to be a lot, and we're getting there. We're a little past halfway here, but we're into now the third option of explosive sequence. And again, we get a tactical op and we get an offensive mod here. So Creeping Barrage is, again, another kind of thematically artillery themed tactical op. So you do, it's going to start with a 1 hex area, 15 kinetic damage with high impact, meaning anything without stagger resistance is going to get staggered. This is going to trigger at the start of each of your turns for 3 turns. And the radius of the area of effect of this is going to increase by 1 hex for each turn. So as you can imagine, this one requires a little bit of planning and coordination, and anticipation of what the enemy is going to do or what you're able to limit the enemy from doing to get the most out of this. But you can also use it simply for area denial or destroying big sections of cover on the map, or ideally, you're hitting units, but it just kind of depends. Again, the cost here isn't super high, so it's something you can use and get mixed results out of and not be the end of the world. On the offensive mod for the guided delivery mechanism, this one's, again, kind of straightforward. It's almost useful across the board. You get an additional hex worth of range on explosive attacks, and the accuracy increase on explosive attacks by 20%, along with the token 20% damage increase. So range and accuracy are really the 2 limiting factors on explosives weapons group, so this just offsets that a bit, and that's obviously very nice. Here we go, we're cruising ahead here. So 4th in the firearms chain, we have kinetic force manipulation, and this is one I'll admit I haven't used this op or this mod a ton, and I could be kind of selling them a little bit short, but here's what they provide anyway, so we'll talk about them. So Kinetic Vectoring Field is a 2 hex area-wide buff for all units inside, making them 25% harder to hit. I should say hit with ranged attacks, and also deal 30% more damage with firearms attacks. Lasts for 2 turns. I feel like when I read this, it should be really good, but I feel like when I've used it, which again has only been I think a couple of times, it hasn't seemed to be that overwhelming. I guess the cost isn't super high, so again, maybe that's something I should just anticipate to be a bit more mixed results with this one, but I will say I do like the ops that provide you a benefit on your turn and the enemy turn, which this one does. But also, I think in certain cases, this can kind of expose you if you group up your army or your units to take most advantage of the vectoring field. You also are exposing yourself to certain types of AoE and other dangerous situations that you can find yourself in. So, bit of pro and a bit of con, I think, to that one. Kinetic Phase Modulator is I think, a relatively specific use offensive mod. So it bypasses up to 4 shields, which is potentially really, really good if we've run into things with lots of shields. It also ignores 50% of the accuracy penalties that come into play from line of sight or having other units in the way, which to me is, again, I haven't had a whole lot of wow factor with this one, but I imagine some people may think more highly of this than I do. But either way, this does apply the 30% damage buff, which is nice. And again, just the shield thing alone, bypassing 4 shields alone is potentially like super good. And I'm actually missing, this is funny, I'm actually missing my text here for, why am I missing my text? Let's see if I can add, I'm not even gonna do it, I'll just read through this one. Apologies for this, as I was building my slides here, I must have screwed up, but so for augmented payloads, we're back on explosive path here. This is the 4th one in the explosive path, so we get smart payload and electrical explosives. These are both offensive mods. Smart payload's nice. It gives you kind of a unique benefit of ignoring doing that friendly fire AoE with your explosive attacks. Also, you get a level of stagger impact added to your attack, so you're going to be staggering units that you otherwise wouldn't without this mod. And also you get the 30% flat damage bonus, which is nice. This one I use, the smart payload I think really is to be used kind of minimally, but on core units that otherwise are in situations where you're potentially going to be doing friendly fire damage. And certainly for armies that you have sort of a mixed range and melee composition, this smart payload becomes even more valuable. For the other mod here, the electrical mod, your explosive attacks now do arc damage instead of kinetic. They also have a chance to apply the electrified debuff to enemies, which I believe is, again, they take, I think, 5 arc damage per turn, and they're 15% less accurate, if I'm not mistaken. Also here, obviously, as it says, you get the straight 30% damage buff on all abilities. And here we go. Now we're back to the final item in the firearms path. This one I have text for. That's good. Good job by me. This is, endgame powered stuff here that we're going to be reviewing. It's a tactical op and offensive mod again. Mass driver cannon, 1 hex AoE damage dealer, 25 kinetic damage, massive impact, meaning anything without stagger immunity is going to be affected by it. And the icing on the cake, it has a chance to instantly disintegrate the target in the center, instantly kill whatever it's directly hitting. It's not cheap. It requires obviously a ton of TACOP points to use, and but obviously you can tell how powerful it is, right? If we're able to get one of these off on a high priority target. Now, not necessarily as exciting, seemingly as exciting, is the weapons mod, the Shockwave Infuser. So this offers a small chance to concuss, which is really strong. Concussed units can't move or use abilities. The primary target, and also stagger adjacent units with high impact. High impact is just stagger resistant units. Or it's gonna stagger anything other than units with either stagger resistance or immunity. Also, you get the 30% token damage buff. So there's lots of potential synergies and benefit here, I think, to the Shockwave Infuser. So as we talked about earlier, some of the more potent artillery-related ops and things, or AoE effects that take time to unfold, if you're able to concuss enemy units and keep them in place for a turn or two, then obviously those operations become a lot more effective, and it's easier to plan and get the benefits out of those ones. So that's where, again, you can start to kind of see some of this energy around, especially how firearms and explosives work together, and some of the other combinations that there are between weapons groups and damage channels and things that we've talked about. So lastly here, and it's fitting that we save this one for last because it's the final step of the explosive path. It's the nuclear solution, and it's a tactical op and weapons mod again, fitting of the name and just as satisfying as you would imagine. So the tactical nuclear strike is a 4-hex radius, massive impact, 25 thermal channel damage, with the damage being reduced the further from the target you get, the center of the target you get. And with the additional effect of every enemy unit in combat, not just the area of effect, has a chance to be blinded, which means blinding, once again, 40% less accurate, and they can't use Overwatch. So clearly, I mean, this thing's just a beast. It's the perfect way for you to open up a large-scale tactical combat. Not allowing the enemy to Overwatch, getting tons of damage off. It's just monstrous, right? So this one's great. There's nothing else that needs to be said about that. Tactical nuclear strike is great. On the weapons side, the offensive mod micronuclear payload is a little more indirect with what it provides, but I think can be really just as destructive. So it destroys 1 armor and shield with each explosive attack you're doing. It also applies the potential to put the immolate debuff on an enemy, which is 12 flat damage per turn. It makes the unit 20% easier to hit. And I mean, at this point in the game, if you have any trouble up to this point dealing damage to enemies, once you get this thing on your units, you're going to be fine. Less damage, or more effective with less armor, less shields that you're going to have to deal with, and potentially even getting the debuff on them, making them easier to hit. You're going to be good to go. So that's it. We made it all the way through the whole Kinetic channel, and by doing so, we covered both the firearms and the explosives weapons types. So there's a lot to get through there. Excuse me. So as you can see, hopefully you can see after this video, there's a lot of nuance, a lot of variety, a lot of theming and effectiveness that are able to be done through Kinetic damage channel. And one of the things, the reason why I want to do this video kind of earlier on was because I think if you understand how weapons groups and damage channels works, and also with some of the mod slots and limitations with ammunition types and things like that, it makes some of the other damage channels easier to understand, I think. But I think really the way that they've implemented this stuff in Planetfall is actually kind of some of the best part of the design that went into the game. It's just fun to use. All the units are fun to use. The skills and abilities are fun to use and combine and make sense and interact in kind of interesting ways. So I think it's great. Hopefully this video was really helpful for you guys, or at least found it interesting. Thanks for watching, and as usual, comment below.